Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Steele. Today I'd like to look at sociology. You've probably been taking Soc for a while if you're taking an applied sociology course. And no doubt you're asking the question, what can I do with this stuff? It's pretty exciting stuff, very interesting, but it's sometimes hard to imagine how will I use it. In this brief video, I'd like to look at several things that surround this concern and this question. First of all, what can you do with sociology? Well, it turns out that almost all sciences have both a basic part and an applied part. Now, by basic, I don't mean simple. By basic, I mean theoretical. A lot of researchers, a lot of scientists, whether they're physics or physicists or biologists or chemists, whether they're psychologists or sociologists, try to create theories that explain how their particular reality works. So, for example, economists are interested in looking at how money and the flow of cash and work and so forth. How does that work? What's a theoretical explanation for that? For sociologists, it's this notion of how is human action considered and how can it work. The concern is, we're looking at interaction at a variety of levels. We're looking at it both at person-to-person level, and we're looking at it at group-to-group level, society-to-society, even globally. And if you're doing basic sociology, you're interested in theories that explain that pretty comprehensive thing. And all sciences, like the ones I've mentioned, and sociology is no different, have an applied side. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and it turns out that the Johns Hopkins University nearby has an applied physics lab. Now, if you know about the Hubble telescope, you know a little bit about the applied physics lab. In essence, what the applied physics lab is doing is taking the basic theories of physics and applying it to real life needs. Consequently, they build a telescope that helps us see the heavens and beyond. Sociology is no different. Sociology has components that can be used to solve real life problems. Now, very often this is done for community groups and for profit and nonprofit organizations. Clearly, you can imagine that organizations are very interested in applying sociology to improve what they do and to understand just what the relationships between departments or persons at various levels are capable of doing. So, in a sense, applied sociology can also be examined at a person-to-person level, at a self-to-self or role-to-role level, just to understand how those interactions work and to help people be a little bit more productive and help to understand their social lives and relationships. It's not really clinical psychology per se, and I wouldn't expect it to be. Clinical psychology is important stuff, but we're not interested necessarily in what every individual is doing or what every individual's psyche might be, but we're concerned at a personal level, for example, at how a relationship might exist within a family or between two other persons in the workplace. And we can take that all the way up to international organizations. So, sociology can be used to understand human interaction at just a variety of levels. And it's pretty powerful stuff. Now, let's me just take a minute to further discuss this notion of the difference between basic, applied, and clinical sociology. Whether you call it clinical or applied, or some people want to call it public sociology, those three kinds of sociology all differ from basic sociology in that basic sociology is looking at and creating good, solid theories. Applied, clinical, and public sociology is useful in trying to use those theories, concepts, methods to solve a problem. Now, let's take a minute, though, to explain, how would I address a problem? Well, sociologists will tell you just go ahead and use the applied sociological perspective. And that's really nice, but some people want to say, hey, that's sort of like saying nothing. I mean, sure, you can use the physics perspective or the biology perspective. Well, what do you mean sociological perspective? Well, very often when a sociologist looks at a situation, that's exactly what she's doing. looking at the situation. For example, we've talked about these kinds of things in some of the books we've written, but two people are walking down a sidewalk. It's important who those two people are, of course, but it's also important that the situation is defined as a sidewalk. Sidewalks aren't uniformly defined in terms of what people are supposed to do in all cultures in the world. If you take a sociological perspective, you're asking some questions about how do people collectively define this reality so that they know what to do. Does collective definition have any impact on what people do? Of course it does. Also, we can start looking at some things that the great theorist Emil Durkheim called social facts. I mean, for example, the demographic size of something, how many people are there in a situation, makes a big difference. If you're a mom or if you're a dad or if you just have little brothers and sisters around, you know what happens when you invite more young kids to a birthday party. It tends to create a kind of chaotic event depending on how old the kids are. Adding more kids to a situation may have an incredible impact on just what's going on and how people see the world and how you as a parent try to do some crowd control. But we can also see the same sort of thing if you're trying to supply services and meet the needs of people. For example, if you look at a group and you're trying to organize a healthcare system for a group of people, you can imagine that the number of people and their ages has some impact on how you generally structure healthcare. Got a lot of young kids around? Well, you're going to need neonatal and natal care, young person care. Older folks? Well, many places around the country are opening gerontological emergency rooms that are focused on older folks. If you know how many people of what kind exist in a population, well, you might be able to more effectively provide services. And so that's a good example. When we use the sociological perspective, we're sort of looking from top down. We're kind of getting up on top at whatever level we are, micro, person to person, or meso, organization to organization, or macro, which is society to society or in a global environment. We're looking from the top down, looking at how these situations are organized and how might we better organize them or make them more effective. Now, furthermore, we need to understand that when we talk about applied, clinical, and public sociology, a number of people just in the sociological field want to just throw all three of those into a concept that we just simply call sociological practice. In other words, many physicians, for example, talk about their practice, or some of our friends or some of our attorneys might also do the same sort of a thing. They will talk about their law practice. Well, so there are some sociologists who also talk about their sociological practice and that they practice sociology. Now, it's going to be a little bit harder to find these people in the electronic yellow pages. If you type in sociological practice, it's going to be unlikely that you're really going to find too many hits, unlike a law practice or unlike a physician's practice. But they're out there and sometimes in disguise. Practitioners in sociology are hired by governments and community organizations and businesses to try to make sense out of what's going on in their various organizations. But very often when they are hired for these situations and by these clients, they sort of lose their sociological labels. For example, a sociological practitioner might be hired by an organization to try to influence and help its organization along, do some organizational development. And by the way, there are people who get degrees in organizational development, and they're not always sociologists. But sociologists are quite capable of doing organizational development. Well, when they come into work for a company, be it General Motors or Microsoft or whatever, they're brought in to do a specific task that sometimes has a job label that doesn't say anything about sociology. And consequently, those practitioners may appear to lose their label as sociologists, but they're really doing sociology. And a background in sociology is extraordinarily helpful in this kind of thing. So as a result, when you think about applied or public or clinical sociology, you're thinking about a practical pursuit. When we're trying to apply sociology, we're trying to say, just what can we do with the sociological view? The perspective, the theories, and the tools can always be helpful in trying to make sense out of human interaction. And of course, applied sociology can be a career option if that's what you're interested in. Or it may be an interesting background for you to try to do another career. Knowing about the sociological principles and research methods and demographic characteristics, for example, are generalizable skills that can be used in many, many places. So ultimately, trying to answer that question, what is applied sociology? I hope I've done a reasonable job of getting you started. I hope you'll enjoy this class and have a good day.